Welcome to the Praxis Report. I'm your co-host, William Barth,
And I'm your co-host, Jonathan Brown.
and we're here today with another Praxis podcast where we try to combine political theory and theoretical analysis of the political challenges that we face in the current day with some practice, meaning some practical solutions that we can implement to help change things for the better, to change things and push them in a progressive and democratic direction. So, with that, John, today we're going to be talking about uh, the Democratic Party and politics, and the topic of the week, which is the struggle in Gaza. And what did you think, John? Your president, Mr. Trump, and made a proposal about what he would like to do for Gaza and the people, I guess, or the residents who live in Gaza. What did you think of all that?
It's another example of this issue we've been talking about that Trump, in his own, warped and horrific and twisted manner, he's attempting to solve the so-called Gaza question by, of course, horrific means of, what they used to call population transfer, or what we would call nowadays ethnic cleansing. He's basically just saying, kick them out. We'll send them to Egypt, send them to Jordan, scatter them amongst the nations in the Middle East. They'll take them in, and America's going to go in and clean it up and make it a Riviera on the beach and build beautiful hotels and casinos and resorts there. And he literally said America is going to own it. America is going to take it. So the proposal by Trump is absolutely insane and horrific. But the thing is, the Democrats are very angry and upset that Trump is saying this, but this is the end result of the process that unfolded while Biden and Harris were in office. The genocide that Biden and Harris were 100% committed to and complicit in committing. Trump is just coming in and saying, okay, you guys made this mess of Gaza. Now I'm going to clean it up. And in his own, and it's of course a horrible solution. It's the wrong solution. It's a solution that all of us will oppose. But he's trying to make a solution, whereas Biden and the Democrats just allowed this genocide to unfold with no plan in place whatsoever.
So, John, just for the listening audience, we've heard Mr. Trump's proposal. What is the Mr. Biden and Ms. Harris and the liberal Democrats who watch our show? What is their solution for the people of Gaza and the people who call themselves Palestinians? What is the liberal Democratic solution to that problem?
Well, they have no solution. They have no solution. I mean, I suppose in terms of, they voice some sort of support for a two-state solution.
A two-state solution. I see.
In rhetoric, though, in rhetoric only, because they might say, yeah, we want a Palestinian state, but of course, the preconditions they impose on the Palestinians to reach that state renders it impossible. And of course, the unconditional support for Israel's military assault on Gaza completely makes it unfeasible. So their plan, of course, is to do the same thing Trump's saying he wants to do. I remember a year ago, Netanyahu himself was out here with a proposal, and some of his more far right extremists in Israel were already doing the same proposal that Trump's doing. They were saying we need to kick them all out, send them to Egypt, open up the corridor to Egypt, turn this into a villa, make a resort here. So Trump's really he's just saying out loud what everybody was thinking and was saying behind closed doors. But the Democrats are more, respectable in how
I
they
see.
say it
Do,
and what
do,
they
do you
do.
have that clip or that article
Yeah.
you can pull up from the United Nations? Because I want to examine that because I hear a lot of Democrats saying we need a two-state solution. I'd like to pull up that clip or that vote on CNN on the two-state solution because it was an interesting
Good idea.
vote.
right here, the U.S.
Oh,
veto.
there it is. Well,
Right.
so this was an interesting vote because the United Nations. By the way, just for the listening audience, this is a kind of an in-depth issue, and we probably should have a whole podcast on it. But there really is no procedure to start a new country. You always wonder how are countries created anyway? Like, oh, is it like the moon and the sun and the Milky Way? Is it just kind of always there? No, there is that's the point. There is no procedure to start a country. And we've actually had quite a few number of new countries over the last 20, 30 years. When the Soviet Union fell, I think out of the old Soviet Union, we had about 15 new countries created that used to be part of the Soviet Union, including Ukraine, and I think Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and all these various stands.
Well, in regards to this issue, the important piece here is that this was written in April of 2024 when Biden was in office, and
So this is the liberal Democratic plan. Here it
right.
is.
This is
So
the Democratic plan.
here we have
Harris, of
the
course, running for president at this time, and it
fantastic.
has
Well, here it is, John. There's the two-state solution. What
right.
happened here? What Biden's representative is right there at the UN, and apparently every single member of the United Nations Security Council, that's a lot of countries, voted, except for two. It looks like there was two abstentions, United Kingdom and
See.
Switzerland. I don't know why
Right.
the Swiss were abstained, but they just didn't want to vote. I guess they felt it was a controversial question and they don't like controversy. But every other country
Right.
on that Security Council, those are the collective nations, major countries of the planet Earth, said, great idea, liberal Democrats. Let's have a two-state solution. We're going to recognize the new state of Palestine. So those 7.5 million Palestinians that live now in Israel or occupied Israeli territories, that includes Jerusalem, West Bank, Gaza, and even in Israel too. They can have their own country. So what did Biden's rep do on that vote? How did they vote? Did they
Well,
vote to
here's the issue.
new state?
The issue with the two-state solution and the question of how states come into being, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine were being partitioned in 1947. And at that time, the United Nations, the Palestinian groups, the Arab groups, and the Israeli Jewish groups were both to be given separate land. That did not happen. Israel took over the entire land, ethnically cleansed the Palestinians in what was called the Nakba, the Great Catastrophe. And since that time, Palestine has been under occupation. Now, every year, the UN continues to vote and says, here's a two-state resolution. And every year, the US and Israel veto the resolution, and every other country in the world supports it.
Whoa, John, wait a minute. We just said the liberal Democrats want a two-state solution.
Well,
What do you mean they vetoed it?
Well, this is the issue. The Democrats are committed to this, falsehood. They claim on, in rhetoric, they'll say, we want a Palestinian state and, yada,
Yes.
yada, yada. But
Well, here was the big chance. They could have created one right there.
yes. And this is a common piece of Israeli propaganda. Israel and the United States, their position is that a Palestinian state can only come about through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, mediated by the United States.
Oh,
And
okay.
so the idea that the United Nations can impose a two-state solution, that is why you see so many Israeli and Zionist supporters hysterical hatred of the United Nations because they consider the United Nations anti-Semitic. Famously, in the 1970s, the Soviet Union and the United Nations, they introduced a resolution declaring Zionism to be a form of racism.
Right.
And the United Nations, of course, routinely issues condemnations of Israeli war crimes. So according to the U.S. position, the only solution they'll have is if Israel sits down with Palestine and negotiates directly while the U.S. mediates it. Of course, that's like the U.S., who is supporting Israel, who are oppressing and occupying and genociding the Palestinians, have to negotiate with their oppressors in order, while Israel's carving up their land and stealing their land in the West Bank. That's their solution. And if you look at the history, like when Bill Clinton was negotiating at Camp David in 2000, they don't offer a real state to the Palestinians. They offer these small little pieces of land that are cut off from each other, not even contiguous territories that are disconnected, surrounded on all sides by Israeli military control, subject to checkpoints. So it's actually this sort of demilitarized zones, or in South Africa, they called it Bantustans. These little,
Well, we have them here in the USA. They're called Indian reservations.
right. I guess you could say that. These are not states in a full sovereign sense, that Palestine would have its own control of its territory, its borders, its economy, but it would be these tiny little reservations that are controlled by Israel and the United States.
What a postmodern irony, John, because it was the United Nations who recognized not only the self-determination rights of the Jewish people, but it was the United Nations who recognized and really sort of confirmed for the world that there needed to be a Jewish state, a Jewish homeland for the Jewish people in the form of a state, and recognize the state of Israel. It was the UN that created Israel. What a reversal! What an irony for these sort of right wingers who sort of run the place today, criticizing the United Nations that created the state of Israel,
Well,
and it
another
would have never been established but for the United Nations.
it's a very important point. And the United Nations proposal, of course, I think was a mistake originally. I don't think partitioning Palestine was the right
Well,
decision.
I think the original concept, as proposed by the British colonial powers that run, don't forget, back then it was all colonial territory. In other words, the white European states sort of ran the world, not just in Arab lands, but in all throughout Africa and Asia as well.
Yeah.
So back then, I think the idea of Lord Belfer, good old
Yes. Well,
Lord Belfer,
that was in
his
1917.
1917. His
Yeah.
idea was to create what they called a Jewish homeland in the state of Palestine.
Yes.
And it looks like now the question is completely reversed. Should we create a Palestinian homeland within the state of Israel? So
Yes.
we have sort of a 360-degree turn. Bottom line is that both of these people live there together on the same territory. Of course, one group dominates the other, and one group, the Palestinian people, 7.5 million of them, have no human rights whatsoever. They don't vote if they live in these occupied territories. They can't travel. They don't have access to food and water. Unemployment is massive. They live in subjugated, impoverished conditions. Half are children, and now they're the subject of a genocide, which is a plan, by the way. I mean, you can solve the problem by simply mass murdering the Palestinians, which, I hate to say it, seems to be well, we'll put it this way. If the Democrats' position is that there should be two states, and we saw the clip, the vote, when the vote came up to create two states, it was the Democrat president, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, the vice president, who opposed two states, who opposed the establishment of a Palestinian state, which can only leave one solution, which means you just have to mass murder the 7.5 million Palestinians who live there, because if they can't have a country and they live in this subjugated conditions where they can't leave their areas, the Gaza's a little like it is like what you might call a Native American reservation. We'd call them Indian reservations here. They can't leave. They have no access. You can't get food in there. Half the people again are unemployed, and there's mass poverty, and there's no water, electricity, and so forth. Sewage in the streets. This sort of problem. If you're not going to give them statehood and let them have their own country where they can be free and have human rights, then the only other solution is either keep them under sort of house arrest or simply mass murder them. And it seems that Biden massively funded Israel's effort to the tune of billions of dollars to begin a mass murder campaign. And as we showed at the last podcast, they've successfully murdered 186,000, that's close to 250,000, we're approaching that number, Palestinians, which is lowering the Palestinian population. So yeah, I would say that the liberal Democrats are phonies. And you might call Trump a con artist, but the liberal Democrats are phonies who accommodate, fund, and support Genocide is the solution to this problem. I can tell you this. Two states is not the Democratic Party's position or solution, because when two states came up for a vote in the United Nations, this is just a couple of months ago, the Democrats said, hell no, no two states. No Palestinian state, no Palestinian homeland, no Palestinian self-determination. Keep those people locked up on their reservations and mass starve them, bomb them, kill them. And they've been doing it very successfully. It's been a successful genocide plan. Congratulations, liberal Democrats. No wonder you were routed in the last election and lost big to, of all people, Donald Trump, one of the biggest con artists of all time. He routed you. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves for supporting a genocide as the solution to the problems of longstanding problems between Arabs and Jews on this beleaguered little spot of land.
Well, I think that the end result, the end logic of Zionism has always been a logic of genocide and ethnic cleansing. There's no possible way that Israel could ever exist without mass killing and displacing the Palestinians. That's how Israel was created. And if we
But John, in the actual theoretical literature, it's been some years since I've read Herzl. Does he actually allude to that? Does
Yes,
Herzl, the theoretical father, does he say we
Herzl
must cleanse the land or move the Arab population, the indigenous population out? Is there references to that in Herzl's book?
in Herzl's time, Theodor Herzl was the founder of Zionism, although
The theoretician, right?
theoretician,
The father of the.
although to be clear, Christian Zionism predated Jewish Zionism by
Okay,
several years.
right,
But the founder of he wrote the Jewish state,
right,
and his idea was openly colonialist. He didn't directly argue for genocide, but he simply saw it in this 19th century white man's burden logic that the civilized Europeans would go in and bring civilization to the savage
right.
land.
So this was the same. This was the same justification used by the Afrikaners who settled in South Africa to create the apartheid state there.
But it was in a different Zionist in the early 20th century named Jabotinsky, he wrote a book called The Iron Wall. And he
Okay.
argued very forcefully, and Jabotinsky was the guy who influenced Netanyahu's branch of Zionism. And he argued in the Iron Wall that the only way a Jewish state could survive is basically if it becomes this militarized fortress, and it will have to displace and get rid of the Palestinians.
And get rid of, meaning including genocide. Is that
That is correct.
include that?
It's the very basis of the idea of Zionism, because they reject the idea that Palestinians even exist. They say this is a land a land without a people for a people without land.
So what an odd position for those liberal Democrats to support a state that says the Palestinians don't exist and do not have a state, and yet the liberal Democrats say, yeah, we actually want a state. And then when the vote comes up to create a Palestinian state, the liberal Democrats say, hell no, we don't want no Palestinian state, at least not now.
But
And
this is the thing about Zionism, and going back to Herzl, and we mentioned the Balfour Declaration in 1917.
Balfour,
Zion,
yeah.
yes, the
Sorry.
Zionist
I
movement.
lived in UK for many years. I learned
Oh,
that.
good. There you go. Okay. The idea that
Lord
Zionism,
Balfour. Go ahead, sorry.
no, well, Zionism was always a movement that relied on support from the imperialist powers. Originally, their support was from the British. They wanted the British to support giving them a piece of land so that European Jewry would be removed from Europe. And Zionists were openly anti-Semitic. They argued that that Jews living in the diaspora were these backwards, disheveled, weak, pathetic beings
Right.
that needed to have military might and power and statehood and be created as a new Jew. They used the term new Jew. They also
Right.
called it a muscular Jew. And so they wanted to get rid of that, weak Jew that was oppressed in Europe and create this militaristic Jew. And they appealed to the European imperialists and said, we'll create this little state for you. It'll do your bidding in the Middle East. It'll serve your interests if you give us weapons and carve out a piece of that territory for us. And that is the relationship first with the British and now since World War II with the United States. And even our leaders, Joe Biden and RFK. Joe Biden has said if Israel didn't exist, we would have to create an Israel so that our interests, our economic interests, and our military geopolitical interests in the Middle East are secured by supporting Israel. And RFK said is the same thing. Israel is a bulwark for us. Israel is a giant aircraft carrier. We sell it weapons. We sell it technology. It defends the middle. Our military and our oil interests in the Middle East are defended by Israel. So the Jews in the Middle East are basically allowing themselves to be pimped out to imperialist interests,
Right.
and the Palestinians are the victims of all of this. And
Right. And so what, I mean, what are these people? I mean, there's 7.5 million Palestinians, or there were, it looks like they killed, they murdered almost 200,000 of them. But still, there's still, I believe Palestinians comprise Israel's majority. If you include Jerusalem, most Jews would agree that Jerusalem's part of Israel. And West Bank, it seems, it's clearly most, I think, Jewish folks believe West Bank's part of Israel. And now Gaza is occupied by Israel. Clearly, a lot of Israelis and in the Jewish community said, "Oh, we don't have anything to do with Gaza," as if Gaza was in Spain or Mexico or Vietnam or something.
well,
But
let's
no, Gaza was always
you want to
always
look at
occupied.
you want to look at Trump's proposal? I think we
So
could.
so let's yeah by the way, I just want to put a close on this little topic.
Yeah.
The reason why this statehood idea is so important is because you have these people, these Palestinians who really comprise the majority of Israel's greater Israel, and I include that the occupied territories, including Gaza. The majority Israeli population is ethnic Arab. So the question is, if there is no state for these 7.5 million ethnic Arabs, not all of them are Arab, by the way. There are Afro-Palestinians as well, and Christian Palestinians. There are white Palestinians, but most are Arab, ethnically Arab. What happens to them? In other words, they have no human rights in Israel. They have no voting rights in Israel if they live in the occupied territories. They're living in this impoverished condition. That's why creating a state for them is so important. Or the only other alternative, God forbid, is for Israel to integrate these 7.5 million people into Israel, in which case Israel will be a majority ethnic Arab state. So what? I mean, so what if it's white or black or Arab or Asian? What the hell does that matter? I mean, we can still preserve Judaism and Hebrew and going to synagogue and read the Torah, even if the people you're living with are not Jewish or white, or what does race and ethnicity have to do with it? But that's the only other solution. One is either a statehood. Two is saying that these ethnic Arabs that live in Israel are equal to white people, which obviously, I hate to say it, my Jewish brethren, so many don't want to recognize this. Although I'll probably get clobbered for this because they'll say, "Oh no, our people of color who live in Israel and Tel Aviv, that we treat them better than they get treated in their own countries." It harkens back to the way we used to talk about African Americans down south in Alabama and Mississippi. We down here in Mississippi and Alabama, we treat our quote unquote our colored folk better than you Northerners do up there when you're talking about integration and civil rights. You hear the same argument. Here it is. It's just embarrassing. It's anti-modern, and it's so goddamn racist. Pardon my language, but anyway, that's a different subject. But I
No,
just want to explain to the audience.
I mean, the only thing I would add to that, I completely agree, but I think it's less it's not entirely a color issue or a race issue in that sense, because Zionism was a European idea and pushed forth by European Jews and European Christians, but the population of Israel the Jewish population is
Correct.
multiracial. A large percentage of the Jewish population, maybe even the majority, are from the actual Middle East as
Good
well.
point. Good
So,
point.
so,
But the leaders are always white, right? There's never been anything but a white president, isn't that right?
yes, yes, I believe so.
Okay, so white folks always going to stay in charge of that place.
It's a it's because Israel is a colonial enterprise, and
Well, that's right. And
And
that is racially
the
profiled.
foundation of this is like I said, the imperialist countries always are going to need to accumulate wealth and power by dispossessing people who are considered lesser than. And the dawn of capitalism was a enslavement of African Americans or enslavement of Africans, shipping them to America, using them to work the land that would harvest the raw resources that were used
Right,
to build the Industrial Revolution.
right.
So there was an original process of enslavement and colonization to accumulate the wealth of capitalism. That is continuing in the state of Israel.
But the Israelis don't seem to need the indigenous Arab population the way the white folks who ran Rhodesia or ran South Africa needed the black masses to work in the diamond mines and so forth. In other words, they
No,
don't seem to need a slave class much the way the whites who settled in Africa needed the indigenous Africans to do the dirty work, so to speak, to run the economy. Is that
well, no,
right? Is
that's
that right?
I think that's a difference. I think they're not attempting necessarily to use Palestinians for slave labor. They're attempting to dispossess them and expropriate the land
Or kill them?
or kill them and kick
Yeah.
them. That's why I think the logic of Zionism is a logic of genocide. The idea is that these people do not even exist. They're not a people. They don't have rights. They can be removed. And that is what the Democrats carried out under Biden and Harris. And Trump is just coming in and saying, I'm going to sweep up the mess. And he's going to go full force with that.
Okay, you want to play that clip from, so maybe we can analyze Mr. Trump's proposal.
All right. So let's watch Trump here.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
The reaction from the gathered audience reflected the enormity of what he just said.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too.
He had just announced that.
Okay. So he goes on.
There's a lot to sort of talk about in that.
Yeah.
John. So why don't
Well,
we do?
I think one of the things I always think about Trump that, this is what is very different between me and our friends.
Liberal Democrat friends?
Yeah. Because the problem with the liberals is that they are very concerned about respectability and saying things in a proper and polite manner. And so when Biden is committing genocide, there was, they weren't saying anything about it. But then Trump says, we're going to take over Gaza, and there's this uproar. But the thing is, they get mad at Trump for saying out loud these things. Trump just in a blunt manner will just splurge out, yeah, we're going to take the Gaza Strip. We're going to own it. We're going to do a great job with it. But then the liberals go crazy. But, Biden was doing that the whole time, and the liberals are silent. So there's a sort of respectability politics that liberal have. And at least with Trump, in my opinion, I would much prefer having a president who is saying the insane, barbaric, savage things out loud so that we know what our enemy is and who we're opposing, instead of having these Democrats who pretend to be respectable and put a rainbow flag on the bombs that they're dropping on people. And
Right.
that's the difference. That's
That's the same criticism that Malcolm X would use all the time. He'd rather, Malcolm X, the great African American human rights leader in the United States, would often always say he'd much rather deal with the Southern white segregationists than the so-called Northern liberal. Because at least you knew who you were dealing with. We used to make an analogy between the wolf and the fox, and the fox was the Northern liberal, and the wolf was the savage Southern segregationist. But the fox, would always end up with in the chicken coop with the chicken on its plate, because it would outsmart you. It would use the fox would pretend to be your friend. And then it wasn't your friend.
And this is the problem.
And the wolf doesn't pretend. You know what you're dealing with the wolf.
Right. And we have to recognize that this is Trump's agenda, but he's merely, in my opinion, he's saying out loud what the American ruling class, the imperialist powers,
Well,
this is what they believe. This is what
you
they.
know, we have to unpack this a little bit. I say even deeper, John, because the difference between the liberal approach, which was genocide, it certainly wasn't a two-state solution. That's for certain. So the only other solution is expulsion or genocide. But Trump is doing this in a very different context. There was an actual genocide taking place in Gaza. It still is, but obviously Trump pushed a peace, a temporary, let's just call it a temporary ceasefire. There's still, killing, mass killing going on, but at least Trump pushed some kind of a halt in hostilities through. Um, but Trump's calling for things like economic development now, jobs, housing. I mean, the place is demolished, and people were genocided, and it's a mess. There's
Yeah.
whatever is going to be done in that area, however you want to approach the problem, we do need a major economic development plan for not only for Gaza, but I would say for all of Palestine. And Trump is giving his ideas for that. Of the two solutions, genocide and war versus peace and economic development, I go with peace and economic development. Now, I'm not excusing the obnoxious, disgusting, racist stuff that Trump is calling for, but I've been involved in the tenants' rights movement all my life in the United States. This is what real estate developers do. They're always pushing out the poor people, who tend to be people of color, whether poor people or low-income Black families, and redevelop the area into luxury condos for rich folks. This is nothing new in the United States. In the United States, it happens all the time. So Trump's a developer, and this is what he does. And but the point that I think is important here is Trump is trying to get some kind of peace proposals discussed. Now, maybe this is an obnoxious one, and it is, and maybe it's ethnic cleansing. It is. It's expulsion. It's not just relocation. It's expelling an ethnic group out of Israel based on their ethnicity or their national identity and ethnicity. But it's a proposal. At least he's talking peace proposals, and that's what we need to do. We need to do it now. Maybe Hamas will have a different proposal, and maybe the king of Saudi Arabia will have a different proposal, and maybe we can have some kind of resolution to this horrible catastrophe.
Well, I'm thinking down the road, Trump coming right out and saying that our intention with Gaza is to ethnically cleanse the population and just bulldoze the whole thing and build casinos and hotels and resorts. He's openly admitting that the reason that Israel exists is to just be this tool of capitalism and imperialism and wealth.
Correct.
And power.
Correct.
And so I think by doing that, he actually is doing a service to the resistance, and he might help in his own unintentionally bring about the fall of the state of Israel, and the Zionist entity will collapse. And on top of that, in order to fully cleanse so-called the Palestinians from Gaza, he is going to have to get either Egypt or Jordan, these two states, to agree to take in the population, which could destabilize both of those countries. Their own populations could revolt against the corrupt regimes that are, US-backed puppets in those countries. And if Trump, as he said, the US will go in and own it, so he's going to annex Gaza and put American soldiers into Gaza, then this will create a giant backlash in America, because then American citizens are now going to say, I don't want to go fight and die in a war for Israel. I don't want to send my son and daughter to fight a war for Israel. And so it will hasten all of the developments that we need to bring about revolutionary change and an end to the U.S. empire, because it will lead to a collapse of Israel's legitimacy. It will lead to a widespread rejection of Zionism and hatred of Israel in the United States, if we have to go on the ground and soldiers start dying there. So this, in a way, it's a horrible plan. Don't get me wrong, but I think it will heighten the contradictions. And
It'll aggravate the contradiction. But could it lead to actual peace talks with major powers participation and regional powers participating in some kind of a compromise plan that all parties, including these regional Arab states, Israel, and the major powers, U.S. Russian Federation and People's Republic in China, in South Africa, could all live with? Could it lead to that?
I don't think so. I don't know because I think that these states like Egypt and Jordan, I think that they will face an internal crisis of legitimacy if they uh, agree to take in
No, but let's say that
Palestinians.
take out the mass expulsion piece, where you're going to expel all the Arabs who live in Israel, but or live on the Israeli occupied territories. Let's see, take that piece out. Could we have some kind of a resolution here? That's not possible? You don't think?
I think that it's hard to say. I think we're just going to have to wait and see what Trump actually does, what the U.S.
Right,
actually does. But if they're, I mean, if they're, I think what Trump's wanting to do is bribe Egypt and Jordan financially,
right.
and give them billions of dollars. I mean, even the whole process is an insane amount of money. They would have to bribe Egypt and Jordan. They would have to pay to resettle millions of people. And then they would have to pay hundreds of billions of dollars to clear out the rubble of Gaza and rebuild it. So we're
Right.
talking a massive, this is kind of a way that capitalism operates, though.
It
It
does.
destroys and destabilizes parts of the world and then profits off of the reconstruction.
And again, real estate gentrification. That's the way
Yes.
it operates. I
Right.
mean,
And I mean, we
they usually pay off the tenants some kind of a
yeah.
relocation fee, and in the end, the developer usually wins out.
I mean, they did this in the Iraq War. I mean, in Iraq, we destroyed an entire country, we occupied it, and we overthrew their government, and we brought in Halliburton and Enron and all these oil companies to come in and loot and plunder and take all their wealth. So,
Right.
so that's a common occurrence. That's basic, strategy of these imperial powers. But I just think that the crisis that Israel will face, Israel's already facing a crisis of legitimacy that is unheard of in the world. It is no longer seen. I mean, it never really was a legitimate country. I think Israel. I completely. I'm 100% anti-Zionist. I am 100% opposed to
Right.
the existence of a state of a Jewish state. The Israeli state, I think, has no legitimacy. But in the eyes of the world, the international community, and even a
It
growing
does.
segment in America, is starting to
Yeah.
reject the legitimacy of Israel and Zionism. Now, I think for us as Jews, it might be bad if this sentiment is directed against Jews as individuals rather than against the imperialist machinery of the state of Israel, which I think we should
Mhm.
push a distinction there. But I do think it's a good thing that Israel loses legitimacy in the eyes of the world. And if America could sever its ties with Israel, and Israel will no longer be able to function as a state. It could not exist without support. It has existed
So,
its entire from Britain to the United Nations to America. It has never existed independently. So
okay.
it
So I don't want to take you off your,
yeah.
your bully pulpit,
Yeah.
but I want to get back to the issue at hand, which is Palestinian statehood. I mean, we are witnessing here a potential controversy over the birth of a nation called Palestine. What about that? Trump doesn't seem to even address the question.
No, it's not. He's not. He doesn't support Palestinian statehood. He's not supporting that. He's
And
trying to
and,
remove the
and
Palestinians and create.
but even his allies in the Arab world, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, I mean, they all those countries who Trump is closely allied with because of their wealth and power and support Palestinian statehood. So how can Trump disappoint his friends and allies in the area? How can
Well,
he?
Well, this is a contradiction. The
Yeah.
United States has been is never going to be able to do what they want to do, which is they have this idea that they can get countries that have regimes that are friendly to the U.S., like Saudi Arabia, and get them to agree to normalize relations with Israel, but sidetrack the Palestine question. And I think that even though obviously this country like Saudi Arabia are completely corrupt, completely corrupt. But they know that if they were to do that, they would face a crisis and could potentially be overthrown from within by
Yeah.
their
What do you scholars call that? Is that a legitimation crisis? Is that
legitimation crisis. Yeah.
crisis? Yeah. That's
Bec-
Michel Foucault.
that is Habermas.
Habermas. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Very good. Very
But the
good.
idea goes back further. I mean, maybe Gramsci and people like that. Just this idea
Right.
that
Right.
states have to rule through hegemony, and a state cannot delegitimize itself to that extent without facing its own, crisis.
Very
So
good.
I think Trump is going to be having a very big difficulty pulling something like this off. But I think it might end up heightening the contradictions and exposing the corruption of Zionism,
I-
imperialism, and all of this.
Okay, well, putting aside all this theorization, I'm really interested to see as a practical matter how this all plays out and watch it play out in the next coming months because at least there's a little different. There is a difference between Trump and the liberal Democrats, which is Trump is talking about a plan. It's a horrible plan. It's an ethnic cleansing plan. It's all the things you're saying. It's a crime against humanity to expel an entire population of indigenous peoples that are currently residing in this state of Israel. But it is a plan, and it is a discussion over a peace talk proposal. And there may be other proposals that start to emerge. I'm really interested to see how this all plays out and whether there may be some kind of a resolution or, as you put it, in the alternative, no resolution, a heightened contradiction, and then what I would guess some kind of degeneration into more war, violence, and annihilation, and maybe ultimately, as you're talking about, a fall of the state of Israel or something like that. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. We're going to have to watch this over the next coming months. But I think the point here for the Praxis report in terms of politics is this is a huge question. We always have to remind ourselves, John, that according to the poll that we discussed at our last podcast, the liberal Democrats lost this election over this genocide in Gaza. I keep raising the genocide card because you're talking about the crime of crimes. With genocide, they call it what do they call it? A problem. There's a book written by there's a book called A Problem from Hell. I mean, this is the crime from hell, where you actually take a people's or a religious group or a national group or an ethnic racial group and just not only annihilate the group, but annihilate their culture, their language, their cultural artifacts, and annihilate the group itself, or kidnap the children, take the children away from the parents, or just kill them, as what's happening in Gaza. So this is why the liberal Democrats lost. I don't think they got the message. I don't think the Democrats admit it. I don't think the Democrats see it, and I think they're going to keep losing. They've already moved on to other issues. They've ignored the Middle East. They're ignoring Gaza. They're ignoring Palestinian statehood completely, and they're getting into these other issues with Elon Musk. Which is an issue we can talk about in future episodes. But it's not the question they lost the election on. It was Gaza. It was the genocide, and the Democrats not only ignored it, but they're culpable in my view. They're culpable.
Very well stated. I think on that note, we will have to end it there. And on future episodes, we're going to keep watching this topic and discussing this topic, very seriously. But we appreciate all of y'all tuning in to the Praxis Report.
Yes, we do.
We hope that you enjoyed the discussion. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe, leave us a comment, check out our Instagram, check out our website. And if you want to support us, go to our Patreon and we can give you some exclusive content. Until next time, peace, y'all.
Peace.